There is a moment in life when the world becomes unbearably loud, not because of sirens or traffic or the chaos outside, but because of the storm that rises within. Thoughts collide, emotions clash, expectations and regrets twist into a single force that presses against the mind until something inside you whispers that you cannot continue this way. Most people wait for life to collapse before they allow themselves to begin again. They wait for the relationship to fall apart, for the job to break them, for their own reflection to become unrecognizable. Only then do they entertain the idea of change, believing that collapse is a prerequisite for transformation. But collapse is not the beginning. Collapse is only the breaking of the shell you refuse to let go of. The real enemy is not failure. The real enemy is noise, the mental clutter that fills every corner of your inner life until you cannot hear your own thoughts. The reactivity that turns every moment into a battle. The constant stimulation that keeps your mind addicted to distraction and your heart starved of peace. Noise does not shout. It erodes, quietly, consistently, relentlessly. And yet, healing does not begin with answers. Healing begins with silence. Not the silence of an empty room, but the silence that grows when the mind stops chasing every thought like prey. The silence that arrives when you stop arguing with your past. The silence that allows you to hear the part of you that has been waiting patiently beneath the noise. Before we understand what silence gives us, we must understand what noise takes away. The tyranny of inner noise. Why we break. Before we heal, noise is not sound. It is agitation. It is the quiet war that takes place inside you long before anything collapses on the outside. Epictetus understood this 2,000 years ago when he taught that disturbances do not come from events themselves, but from the judgments we attach to them. Modern psychology confirms this. The mind is not overwhelmed by reality. It is overwhelmed by the stories it creates about reality. Inner noise is the accumulation of assumptions, predictions, and fears. It is cognitive overload, the brain attempting to process more than it was designed to hold. Andrew Huberman describes how constant stimulation keeps the nervous system locked in a cycle of anticipatory stress. The dopamine system strains to chase the next hit of clarity, the next hit of control. The mind begins to predict threats that may never come, generating loops of worry that feel real simply because they are loud. This is why people break. Not because life becomes unlivable, but because their thoughts do. The inner world corrodes faster than the outer one. There is relief in recognizing this, in finally naming the weight, because to let go, we first need to see what we've been carrying. The weight you don't realize you carry. Unseen emotional baggage. Most of what exhausts you never appears on the surface. There are emotions you've ignored for years, experiences you never fully processed, and fears you buried so deeply that they now operate in silence, shaping every reaction without your awareness. Daniel Goleman describes this as emotional residue. It lingers layer upon layer like sandbags tied to your mind. You move through life slower, heavier, without understanding why. The Stoics called this fantasia, distorted impressions that cloud perception. When an emotion is unexamined, it becomes a lens. When a fear is unspoken, it becomes a filter. You stop seeing the world as it is and begin seeing it through the weight of your past. Neuroscience reveals something similar. The brain is predictive by design. When an emotional wound is left unresolved, the nervous system continues repeating the same survival patterns, reacting to old threats as if they were present. It is not the past that holds you. It is your brain's insistence on reliving it. This is the hidden cost of carrying what was never meant to stay. The body tenses, the breath shortens, the mind narrows. You mistake tension for identity and fatigue for fate. So the question becomes, how do we release what is already inside us? The discipline of letting go. What Stoics actually meant by release. Letting go is often misunderstood. People imagine it as surrender, as passivity, as stepping back from life. The Stoics saw it differently. To them, letting go was an act of sovereignty, a deliberate decision to reclaim the mind from unnecessary burdens. Marcus Aurelius captured this with a single command to himself. Ask yourself at every moment, is this essential? Release is not the absence of effort. It is the redirection of effort toward what truly matters. Modern neuroscience supports this view. The brain forms loops, emotional loops, behavioral loops, thought loops. When you replay the same narrative, the same fear, the same grievance, the same self-doubt, you strengthen the neural pathway that carries it. Letting go is not forgetting. It is interrupting. It is choosing a different loop and firing a different pattern. Neuroplasticity shows that the brain rewires itself through repetition. Every time you refuse to rehearse an old wound, you weaken its influence. Every time you shift your attention from rumination to presence, you carve a new neural path. Letting go becomes a discipline, a daily practice of releasing what does not serve your growth. This is strength, not escape. Because the one who can drop the unnecessary becomes lighter, clearer, more available to life. But release requires a doorway, and that doorway is silence. Silence is a technology. The neuroscience of stillness. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is the absence of internal friction. When the world around you quiets, the mind is forced to confront the noise within. At first, this feels uncomfortable, but that discomfort is the threshold of transformation, because silence is a biological tool, a profound recalibration of the nervous system. Andrew Huberman explains that periods of intentional quiet reduce neural load. For the first time in a long time, the brain is not reacting, it is repairing. Dopamine baselines reset, stress hormones fall. The salience network, the system responsible for detecting what truly matters, comes back online. You do not become weaker in silence. You become more precise. The Stoics intuited this centuries before neuroscience. They called it apatheia, not apathy, but liberation from destructive passions. Silence was the furnace in which the mind was purified. Cleanthes used the metaphor of a clear lake. Only when the waters are still do they reflect the world accurately. Stillness was not a luxury, it was a method. Joe Dispenza describes something similar. In silence, the brain stops predicting long enough to perceive. Identity loosens. Habit dissolves, possibility expands. Silence is not romantic, it is functional. It is a strategic intervention against the chaos of an overstimulated mind. And when the brain quiets down, something else emerges. Space. The sacred space between thoughts, where renewal begins. There is a moment the ancient philosophers rarely described directly, yet all of them pointed toward it with metaphors, prayers, and disciplined practice. It is the brief, almost imperceptible space that appears when the mind finally stops clinging to what agitates it. A space between thoughts. A clearing in the forest of noise. A silence that is not empty, but alive. Cleanthes compared the human soul to a calm sea. When the waters are agitated, nothing can be seen clearly. The deeper structures remain hidden under waves of impulse. But when the waters settle, even for a few seconds, the truth reflects itself effortlessly. Modern neuroscience has shown that this metaphor is more literal than poetic. When the constant firing of the limbic system begins to ease, when emotional circuits stop predicting danger and fall into temporary stillness, the prefrontal cortex, the seat of clarity, reasoning, and long-term decision-making, regains its authority. This shift is profound. In agitation, the brain reacts. In stillness, it perceives. Between thoughts, your mind is not trying to protect or defend. It is not rehearsing old arguments or anticipating future fears. It simply observes. It becomes aware of itself. The noise that once defined your internal landscape loses its power. You begin to feel something that is difficult to describe, yet unmistakable when experienced: spaciousness. This space is the birthplace of renewal. It is where self-doubt loses its edges, where regret stops echoing, where the future stops feeling like a threat, where you remember that your thoughts are movements, not definitions. Jordan Peterson explains that people often confuse their internal commentary with their identity. But when you enter this space, you see the separation clearly. You are not the storm. You are the sky in which the storm happens. Daniel Goleman would call this a moment of meta-awareness, where the mind becomes aware of its own patterns without being trapped inside them. The Stoics trained for this space through repetition, reflection, and voluntary discomfort. They knew that if a person could maintain clarity between thoughts, they could act from virtue instead of impulse. They could choose courage over fear, wisdom over confusion, discipline over desire. In this space, you do not find the world. You find yourself, meeting yourself without the past. Identity beyond old stories. There comes a moment in every inward journey when the mind, finally quiet, reveals something unexpected. Not a revelation about the world, not a grand insight about destiny, but an encounter with the self that exists beneath accumulated narratives. It is disorienting at first, because so much of what we call identity is nothing more than repetition. Repetition of fears, repetition of roles, repetition of expectations handed to us long before we had the awareness to question them. Montaigne once wrote that the greatest journey a person can take is the journey inward, the one in which you strip away what was borrowed in order to meet what is truly yours. Modern psychology echoes this. The self is not a fixed entity. It is a story told so many times that it begins to feel permanent. But permanence is an illusion. The brain's default mode network constantly reconstructs your sense of identity through memory, emotion, and prediction. This means that who you believe you are is heavily shaped by who you used to be. This becomes a trap. Past failure becomes, I always fail. Past hurt becomes, I am hard to love. Past silence becomes, my voice doesn't matter. Early roles solidify into adult cages. Jordan Peterson argues that a person cannot move forward if they cling to an identity built on outdated suffering. Stoicism agrees. Epictetus taught that no one is chained by circumstances, only by the interpretations they refuse to release. The Stoic path is not about becoming a new person. It is about removing what never belonged to you in the first place. When the mind enters stillness, the past loses its authority. Neural patterns tied to old emotional survival begin to fade. Joe Dispenza describes this state as a neurological opening, where the brain is no longer firing in the configuration of the old self. You stop reacting from memory, and for the first time in a long time, you act from possibility. It feels like meeting a stranger you somehow recognize, a version of yourself unshaped by fear, unburdened by roles, untouched by the narratives you inherited. This is the self that existed before the world told you who to be, before disappointment rewired your trust, before comparison clouded your worth, before the noise of expectation drowned your inner voice. To meet yourself without the past is to stand in the present moment completely unarmored. It is the courage to ask, if none of my old stories were true, who would I be? And the humility to accept the answer without rushing back to the familiar. Here, identity becomes choice instead of consequence. Freedom becomes internal rather than circumstantial, and your future is no longer an extension of your wounds, but a reflection of your clarity. Only now are you ready for the hardest part, beginning again. The art of starting over, Stoic renewal, through action. Starting over is often romanticized as a dramatic reinvention, a sudden break from the past, a moment where everything finally aligns. But true renewal is quieter, less theatrical, and far more demanding. It is not a moment. It is a discipline, a way of moving through the world with deliberate intention, even when uncertainty remains. The Stoics understood this deeply. They never spoke of reinvention as a grand spectacle. Instead, they framed every new beginning through the lens of prohairesis, the inner faculty of choice, the deeply personal power that no circumstance, no person, no misfortune can take from you. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself each morning that no matter what the day brought, he could always return to what was within his control. Epictetus went further. He insisted that the ability to choose your next action is the root of all freedom. Modern psychology agrees. Behavioral activation, one of the most effective tools against paralysis and emotional stagnation, teaches that change begins not with motivation, but with movement. You act first. The feeling comes later. The brain rewires itself through behavior. Each small action is a signal to the nervous system. We are no longer who we were. This reframes starting over. It is not about having a clear plan, perfect conditions, or immediate certainty. It is about taking one intentional step, then another, and then another, until repetition transforms into identity. Tiny actions repeated with conviction sculpt the neural circuits of a new self. Huberman often reminds us that consistency, not intensity, creates lasting change. Starting over is not an escape from the past. It is a refusal to let the past dictate who you become. Jordan Peterson emphasizes that meaning emerges when you shoulder responsibility for your next action, not when you wait for the world to grant you permission. The Stoics mirrored this idea when they taught that virtue is revealed through behavior, not intention. You start over by simplifying, by choosing what is essential and releasing what is not, by embracing discomfort as the cost of clarity. Every day becomes an opportunity to step out of the narrative that held you. Every choice becomes an affirmation that you are not powerless. You are rebuilding. A new beginning is not a reset button. It is a daily ritual. You breathe, you act, you refine, you continue. There is no applause in this process, no dramatic music, no grand announcement to the world. It is the quiet reconstruction of a life aligned with your highest values. But to rebuild, you must choose the foundation carefully. Rebuilding on virtue, the core of a life that cannot collapse. When you begin again, the question is not how fast you rebuild, but what you rebuild upon. Most people try to construct a new life using the same fragile materials that caused the last version to fall apart. External validation, impulsive desires, unstable emotions, borrowed beliefs. These foundations crack under the first sign of pressure. They cannot hold the weight of a meaningful existence. The Stoics knew this better than anyone. They believed that only a life anchored in virtue could withstand the unpredictability of fortune. Virtue was not moral decoration, it was structural integrity. Wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice were not abstract ideals. They were the supporting beams of an unshakable mind. Wisdom sharpens perception. It allows you to see reality clearly, without the distortions of fear or desire. Neuroscience confirms that clarity reduces cognitive load, improving emotional regulation and decision-making. Wisdom quiets the mind because clarity eliminates unnecessary mental friction. Courage strengthens action. It is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to be ruled by it. From a neurological standpoint, courage engages the prefrontal cortex, overriding limbic impulses. It trains the brain to act from intention rather than instinct. A person with courage moves forward even when the terrain is uncertain. Temperance regulates desire. In a world engineered to overstimulate the dopamine system, temperance becomes a form of mental warfare. It protects your attention from fragmentation and your discipline from erosion. Huberman often notes that the ability to delay gratification is one of the most powerful predictors of long-term well-being. The Stoics understood this long before neuroscience existed. Justice aligns your life with integrity. It is the recognition that your actions reverberate beyond your own world. Modern psychology shows that meaning and responsibility are inherently linked. When your actions serve something larger than your immediate impulses, the brain generates deeper and more stable forms of fulfillment. Justice anchors your life in purpose rather than preference. When these virtues become your foundation, circumstances lose their power to destabilize you. You do not break under pressure because your structure is not built on emotion. It is built on principle. You do not collapse with disappointment because your worth is not contingent on outcomes. It is rooted in character. You do not fall apart in uncertainty because your direction comes from within, not from the noise around you. Rebuilding on virtue makes you resilient in a way that nothing external can replicate. You become less reactive and more intentional, less dependent and more autonomous, less scattered and more whole. The world no longer shakes you the same way because you are not put together the same way. And when the foundation is stable, you are finally ready to rise into a different kind of strength, unshakable in silence, becoming the calm observer of your own life. There is a point in inner transformation where silence stops feeling like emptiness and begins to feel like strength. Not the loud, forceful strength that the world celebrates, but a deeper, quieter form, the strength of someone who is no longer controlled by internal storms. This is the Stoic ideal of the sage, not a perfect being, but a sovereign one, a person whose mind is disciplined enough to remain their own, even when life becomes turbulent. Zeno and Chrysippus described this mental state as ruling over oneself. Cato embodied it in action, refusing to allow circumstances or fear to break his internal principles. They were not detached from the world, they were anchored within it. Their calm was not passivity, it was mastery. Modern neuroscience helps us understand what this mastery looks like in the brain. When you learn to observe your emotions instead of fusing with them, the prefrontal cortex becomes active. This is the region responsible for reasoning, long-term planning, and self-regulation. At the same time, the limbic system, home of emotional reactivity, begins to quiet. The shift is physical, measurable, and transformative. You stop being pulled by every impulse. You stop drowning in every thought. You become steady. Silence becomes your weapon. Not a retreat from life, but a strategic pause before action. The Stoics practiced this voluntarily. They paused before speaking, before judging, before reacting. It was their way of ensuring that action rose from clarity, not chaos. In silence, the mind becomes a mirror. You see your thoughts without becoming them. You observe your fear without obeying it. You meet your impulses without being consumed by them. This observational stance creates a psychological distance that Jordan Peterson often refers to as the emergence of the inner witness. The part of you that watches instead of panics. The part that evaluates instead of collapses. The part that knows that a single moment of stillness can prevent a lifetime of regret. When you embody this state, your relationship with life changes. Challenges no longer shock you in the same way. You respond instead of react. You listen instead of fill the air. You carry yourself with a composure that cannot be faked because it is built on patience, discipline, and deep self-understanding. This is what it means to become unshakable, not untouched by difficulty, but undominated by it. Not emotionless, but emotionally sovereign. Not silent because you have nothing to say, but silent because your words now come from a place of truth. And now one truth remains. Meditative closing. You don't need noise to heal. You need stillness. There is a moment at the end of every inner journey when the noise finally settles. Not because life became easier, and not because circumstances suddenly aligned, but because you learned to step outside the storm instead of living in its center. This is the quiet completion of the path you have walked through reflection, discipline, and awareness. Nothing dramatic happens outwardly. No one applauds. No one notices. Yet something profound shifts within you. Healing was never about collecting answers. It was never about forcing breakthroughs or rearranging the world so you could feel safe. Healing begins when the mind unclenches, when the breath slows, when the present moment stops feeling like an enemy and begins to feel like a home. You don't need noise to heal. You need stillness. Stoicism teaches that peace comes not from the absence of difficulty, but from the presence of perspective. Neuroscience confirms that the nervous system stabilizes not through stimulation, but through regulated calm. When you choose silence, you give your brain oxygen. You give your emotions space. You give your life direction. You are allowed to release what no longer serves you. You are allowed to begin again without justification or apology. You are allowed to build quietly, without noise, without comparison, without the pressure to perform for an audience that does not live inside your skin. Let the world rush if it wants. Let others drown in distraction if they choose. You no longer need to follow the rhythm of a life that exhausts you. You can walk slowly. You can speak less. You can choose deliberately. You can create a new beginning rooted not in desperation, but in clarity. Silence is not a void, it is a doorway. In its depths, the mind reorganizes itself. In its softness, the heart returns to balance. In its stillness, the self that was buried beneath years of noise finally rises to the surface. Take one breath, then another. Feel the weight you have been carrying begin to loosen. Feel the old narratives fall away. Feel the possibility of what you can become take shape, not as a fantasy, but as a grounded truth. Finally, remember this. You were never meant to heal in chaos. You were meant to heal in quiet. You were meant to begin again from a place of inner steadiness, not urgency. Let go in silence. Begin again with strength.